Welcome to the Talent Equation Podcast. If you are passionate about helping young people to unleash their potential and want to find ways to do that better, then you've come to the right place. The Talent Equation Podcast seeks to answer the important questions facing parents, coaches, and talent developers as they try to help young people become the best they can be. This is a series of unscripted, unpolished conversations between people at the razor's edge of the talent community who are prepared to share their knowledge, experiences, and challenges in an effort to help others get better faster. Listen, reflect, and don't forget to join the discussion at thetalentequation.co.uk. Enjoy the show.
Well, this morning is a little bit of a different episode of the Talent Equation podcast, and I think it's a particularly apt one because I'm actually standing on the side of a football pitch as my little boy is playing. My little boy Evan, who's 10, is playing in his first ever proper, in inverted commas, football match. And actually, just before we started recording, he'd received the ball at right back, given the ball away, and the opposition had scored a goal. So an interesting baptism for him. But this is particularly apt because I'm on the sideline with a load of parents. I'm being a sports parent, and today I'm speaking to Gordon MacLelland from Working with Parents in Sport. Gordon, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Stuart, and thanks for letting us be part of this unique experiment.
Well, we'll see how it goes in terms of the recording. We're recording in the cloud from, using the modern technology of 3G and all that sort of stuff. So we'll see how we go, but hopefully we'll be good. Beautiful sunny day on the side here. So it's a nice day to be able to do this. Gordon, the starting point, I suppose. Tell me the story of working with parents in sport.
Yeah, so it came about, Stuart, very much based on my own experience as a sporting parent. Obviously, done lots of coaching over the last 15, 20 years. And I sent my young son out into the world of football. We were talent spotted at the age of 5, and he became involved with a couple of major English football clubs, let's say. And I obviously had to navigate and look at the behaviours around parents and their expectations of the children on the touchlines, just like you are this morning. And what became blatantly apparent during this whole experience was the fact that many parents wanted to do the right things by the children, but actually were poorly informed, and not a lot had been done to really support and positively engage them. You know, there's been lots of campaigns over the years that have focused on negative behaviour, putting them in boxes, telling them that they've been naughty and they shouldn't do this and shouldn't do that. And I wanted to create somewhere where parents could go, where they felt safe and supported, and a portal with sort of content that they could relate to. You know, it was huge for me that it didn't become too scientific. We wanted to reach the people in the middle of Merseyside, the people in the middle of London, and we wanted people to be able to relate to some of our experiences and what we found. So from that, we've sort of created what we've got, and we're enjoying working with lots of different people.
Fantastic. I mean, and certainly as I've seen, you guys grow in social media and also in the work that I do in the sports industry, I find myself increasingly hearing of you and what have you. So it's high time we had this conversation, because the whole area around parenting, I think, is a major issue on lots of different levels. So there's loads of stuff for us to talk about. My jump off point in your intro, though, is talent spotted at 5. Talk me through that.
Well, it's bizarre, isn't it? I'm not going to name football clubs, but actually, it can go even earlier than that. Actually, I think my son was 4, and I was sat on a bench in a local sort of sports hall. Wasn't really a sports hall. I was playing on my phone because I wasn't really that bothered. My expectation of my child was, off you go, get yourself out onto the pitch, go and enjoy yourself, have some fun. And the next thing I know, I'm approached by a scout from a football club who gave me a card and said, your son's got some ability. And it was a really bizarre moment, because as a parent, we all like to be given good news, don't we? If somebody comes to you and tell you your child's doing well, we like that as parents. So you sat there and thinking, wow, this is amazing. And I knew about talent ID and that my child was 4 and how bonkers is this. But actually, it was brilliant, because you get out into the car after the session and you ring your wife and say, you'll never believe this, such and such thinks our child's got some ability. So we just carried on with the football, and we ended up taking him to a couple of sessions, some of these pre-academy things. Then you just realise the sheer magnitude, the number of children, how mad it is that we can even be selecting, 5, 6, 7. I mean, even we know that really, pre-puberty, it's difficult anyway. So that was how the journey started. I mean, luckily we've managed to manage it well as parents, in terms of making sure that he gets out and does lots of other sports. There's lots of parents that we've been involved with for the last few years who do 12 months a year of football and believe that the more they do, the better their child will be. And we've tried to trust the science and limit the number of sessions a week, play lots of different sports. And I'm delighted to say he's still in he's 10 now and he's in an academy, and crucially, he's still loving his football, and that's the important thing.
Well, that's a great, I'm pleased to hear that, to be honest, because I would have said, and this is only based on, I guess, some of the information that, we've had in books like No Hunger in Paradise, and, speaking to various people in that kind of academy world, that I imagine that story of, being identified and selected, I suppose, that early, and still being involved and still enjoying the game is an atypical story, because from what I hear, and certainly some of the messaging around this space, is that this kind of early selection, early identification thing is, I guess, acting as a bit of a challenge, because it's almost making the child sports experience, almost like too serious, too quick. Now, I know I'm generalizing enormously, because I know an awful lot of academies are doing some fantastic stuff, and they're making the kind of sports experience, a really positive one, and, kids are getting opportunities to play in ways that they wouldn't otherwise get to play. So in many ways, that's very much the best experience that young people can have. But I can't help but think that I wouldn't say that's the majority of situations. I think the majority of situations, it's quite a serious endeavour, isn't it? It's almost like you're embarking on a career aged 5. And all the language and the discussion around that kind of that environment is very much focused on performance and improvement and all that sort of stuff. So it's great to hear, and it sounds to me like I'd be interested to know kind of what you feel are the kind of key ingredients within that academy that, or the academies that you've been involved in, that you feel like, has led to, the experience being as positive as it has been.
Yeah, do you know what, Stuart? And the first club that we were involved with, absolutely no interaction with anybody for 18 months. Nobody in the club. You turned up, you were treated like cattle. You were sat on the side, you couldn't speak. They did it, and 18 months later we actually moved clubs just because it suited us logistically, and it was the first time we entered into any conversation. As you say, even with the new clubs, I think they're slowly beginning to realise the importance of bringing parents into the process, because the reality is, okay, maybe we've been very lucky, and I'm lucky that I understand, the long-term talent ID. I understand the types of questions that you maybe ask your child after the game. I understand that I don't have to get my 10,000 hours done as quickly as possible. I understand that I don't have to play 12 months of the year, 5 days a week, is going to give me any guarantees of my child having any success. So I've been able to manage it, and for us, we treat it just like anybody else would, going off to the park on a Sunday to play for a local club side. It was great. I do have to say, it was great to see this week the football club he is involved with actually ran a Caring Leaders Award, and they nominated a couple of boys out of every age group to do it, and they got an opportunity to learn about leadership. And I'm really big when I talk to parents that once the lights go down or once they stop playing, what life skills have we actually equipped these children with? And if we do equip them and use sport as the vehicle to equip them with all these amazing life skills, if they do then get released by these academies later on, we haven't left them in such a state where there's nowhere to go.
That's such an important factor there, isn't it? It really is an area that shouldn't be lost. Something you said at the start of that, though, that I just would like to pick up on is, when we talk about the 10,000 hours. I do think that there's an awful lot been made of the 10,000 hour the so-called in inverted commas rule, which isn't a rule, but was called a rule by Malcolm Gladwell, so everyone calls it the 10,000 hours rule. And I do know that there are people out there, parents actually, who are ticking off the hours on the fridge, almost on that basis of 9,999, and then right, one more hour and we're in. Here it comes. Here's the elite contract or whatever. Yeah. Gold medals just around the corner. And it's sort of, the message of that has been lost. The message is one of, it's all about practice quantity, whereas in reality, it's also about practice quality. And one of the things that sort of, subsequent research has identified is that the 10,000 hours, the average, this average retrospectively that, looked at athletes and said, okay, on an average basis, they're generally doing a lot. And it generally seems to be around 10,000. What's been lost in that is the deliberate practice bit. And the deliberate practice bit is really important because the quality of that practice was a really critical element. And they now discover that it's quite a wide variance. The message, though, is if you want to get good at something, then it does take some time. You do have to work hard and you do have to be committed. And that should be the message instead of this sort of ironic number of 10,000 hours.
Yeah. I mean, look, there's two things there, picking up on what you just said. The problem that parents face, Stuart, is that because the 10,000 hour thing's bandied around and nobody's actually taken the time to put it into the context that you've just explained, they are left to pick up on these things that they read, things that they see in the media. We often get quoted, well, look at the model that worked for Venus and Serena or the model that worked for Tiger Woods. Yeah. And it's like, but what about the millions that are hung out on the pavement, no longer playing sport that we don't hear anything about, adopting a similar model?
The ones that also get to the elite level but haven't followed that path were multi-sport and then only specialised much, much later, like Nick Faldo, Greg Norman, those sorts of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And so from our point of view with parents, it's about, educating them, informing them, supporting them, trying to dispel, what is much sort of publicised or popular media. And the thing you said there, the key word, commitment, underpins any success. We can be sat here talking about, whether we want to do this, we want to do that. Fundamentally, the one bit of language, and we say this in our parents' talk, is your child and probably you, because you'll be doing all the support network. You do need to have some commitment, and they're the skills that we need to be trying to harness.
Totally agree with you. Sorry, I cut you off halfway through your previous point, if you can remember what it was.
Oh, did it? Just talking about the fact that a lot of parents, because they haven't had these popularised myths sort of explained to them, and it's just sort of all out in the public domain, and it's never been put into any context. It was a big driver in why we set up, in trying to keep it real and explain it to them in ways they can understand.
Yeah, and that's key, isn't it? Because like you say, I mean, it's easy for us to sit here because we've got opportunities to, read through some of the science and understand these things. But like the vast majority of people are out there, they've got busy lives, there's lots of stuff going on, and they haven't got time to be able to delve into this material in any great length. And so therefore, when you hear in the popular media, and also, you hear in, just generally in the conversation around this idea of 10,000 hours, it becomes really sticky. And then as a result, then it becomes, like you say, people call it a myth, but it's one of those things that becomes very, very difficult to break. And there's a lot of those out there, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. There's loads of them. And as I say, there's a very large middle of parents, Stuart, who actually would like it explained to them and explained in a way that they can practically use.
Right. So it's half time in the middle of this game.
And the score?
I think it's about they're losing 5-0.
Oh, goodness.
Coach has got his
Are you going to go on it? What are you going to do now as a dad, Stuart?
I'm literally staying well away and allowing the coach to get on with it. In fact, the coach is a good friend of mine. His son plays in my hockey team as well, and I'll probably help him with some reflection later on and give him a little bit of informal coach development type time.
Fantastic. Could be the greatest comeback since Lazarus second half.
The great thing about it though is that he's not placing emphasis on the outcome. He's actually, through some conversations we've had over the last couple of months, he's implemented a system with his group where he's actually interestingly enough, he wanted to get the parents much more involved in the learning journey that the children were on. And so his way of doing that is he's created within the team that like a culture where they get points for various things away from the game. So they get communication points, they get sportsmanship points or teamship points, and I think they get commitment points if they show commitment. And so he calls from the other side. I think the whole respect line thing is a bit random, to be honest. But anyway, he calls from the side of the pitch and he shouts out like, Theo, communication point, and the parents have to log them on the other side of the pitch. And at the end of the game, the players can come up and find out how many communication points, teamwork points, etc., etc. So he's been experimenting with it this season, so he's been doing it for the last, I suppose, 3 or 4 weeks. And he says it's had a massive impact on the way the players engage. But it's quite a great. What I love about it as an idea is the way it's created an increased connection between coach and parent, which I feel, when you've got parents on one side of the field and the coach on the other, has been something that's been taken away from the world of football. And I certainly hear that from a lot of coaches, that kind of disconnect is becoming increasingly, and it then makes the relationships even worse.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, what a great concept, Stuart, isn't it? I mean, talk about being creative and finding ways of engaging and bringing parents into the process, that is, and getting them to focus on something that's, completely different from winning and, how many goals did you score? I mean, we tell the joke in our talks, if we were talking and about our game at the weekend, you can guarantee the first question a parent will ask their child when they walk in the back door, if they haven't seen the game, did you win? Second question will probably follow with, did you score? The child will probably say no, and that's it for another week. And that would be, very commonplace, and great that he's got all those other things going on so that the parents can reinforce, what the coach is doing. Because we all know that the best outcomes for players, for children, are when we've got people working together, whether that be parent, coach and child, or we've got school, parent and child. They create the greatest outcomes.
There's a very important implicit message in what you've just said as well that I think is lost on quite a few people, which is those two questions of, did you win, did you score? And then, if what will happen is just kind of subconsciously, if the answer to that is yes, then there'll be a further conversation and there will be interest. So, for example, if it's yes, we won. Oh yeah, what was the score? Oh yeah, how did you get on? Did you get a goal or anything like that? Did you score? Yes. Oh, what was it like? Tell me more. So there's a discussion. If there's the kind of if the answer is a negative one, did you win? No. Did you score? No. And the conversation stops there. Then there is an implied message, and the implied message is your worth as an individual is connected to the outcome of the activity that you're involved with, this whole idea of contingent self-worth.
Yeah.
And again, that's something that nobody means to do. No parent in their world would mean to do that to their child. But if you're not aware of it, what they realise then is that actually, oh, blimey, implicitly we're sending out some messages to our children that your worth as a human being is linked to what you do and what you achieve. And that takes them away from the sense of actually, I love you because of you. I love you because you're my child. I love you whatever it is you choose to do. It's not based on how well you do it or all those sorts of things.
Yeah, really great point, and absolutely. And the number of parents who unfortunately, define their own success, through the child, it makes it very difficult, doesn't it? And when everything's based around the outcome and not the process, as you say, we're not giving these children the very best chance and the very best experience. But, some parents, I mean, Stuart, you and I at least have worked in coaching spheres where we understand, some of these questions that we maybe want to ask, what were the best bits? Did you have fun? Who was your best teammate? What did you do after the game? What was the best bit for you? What might you do differently next week? Some parents, when you talk to them, they wouldn't even come up with these questions. They just wouldn't even know that that's the type of question to ask. And that's again one of the things that that we talk a lot about is, asking great questions, having a bank of questions that you can practically use on a weekly basis, no matter what the score is.
And again, that's a great point. They don't know that that's a question that you can ask. And it's not, like I said, what this isn't about is saying, oh, why don't you know to ask that question? I've got to be honest with you. I've been with my, little boy after sport, either as his coach sometimes or as a parent. And sometimes you don't know, the questions don't come to you. So actually, all those ones that you just listed there, literally 3 of those, I thought, that's a great question to ask, isn't it? I ought to say that in the car on the way home after the football match. What was the best thing about it? What was it like with your teammates? Who was friendly towards you? What were the things that you enjoyed about it? They're all great questions. They're a great conversation, aren't they? And then that whole thing of that car ride home, that's what kids say that they hate the most, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, do you know what, Stuart? And he said, why did I set up? I had some awful car journeys when my child was 5 or 6. Some absolute shockers. And I'm even embarrassed to almost bring them up. But I think it's really important that we're honest in this field. As you say, we're not here to preach to parents and tell people that they've done a bad job, because everybody does things because they love the child, in the best interests of the child. But we've got to have these discussions to sort of bring it out into the open. And do you know what? Even knowing all this, I still make massive mistakes during the course of the year, but I fundamentally believe that even if we can change 20% of our own behaviour to make the child's experience better, just based on the fact that these discussions are out in the open, or we see it from another angle, it makes the whole project worthwhile.
I totally agree with you. And like you say, I think what I just picked up from what you were saying there is, there's no such thing as a perfect parent, is there, in sport? We're always going to make mistakes all the way through. There's no such thing as a perfect parent, but there is such a thing as we can get better at it, can't we? Week to week, day to day. And part of that is actually, spending a little bit of time, reading about it, maybe, spending time with others, having conversations, and just making it kind of matter to us that, how we can be around the children can make such a difference to their experience and their potential lifelong enjoyment of sport.
Yeah, and we've got to make it fun for parents. You say your guy out there is doing a great job bringing them into the process. These games on the side of the pitch, playing games like bingo, maybe using the bingo clickers. To count up, positive comments that he held on, and all these different ways that we can bring people into the process is far more productive than saying, there's your line, go and stand behind it and try not to say too much.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, I just got slightly distracted then, Gordon, because he's now in goal for the second half, and this is his first proper game in goal. So I'm slightly, oh no, ball's gone in. He did quite well. He nearly got it, but it went in. Such a shame. Sorry, you're getting a podcast and commentary from the game as well.
Fantastic. I'll tell you what, I'll ring up Radio 5. You can have a job this afternoon.
Me and Motti, we could be doing this.
Brilliant.
The great thing is that what the coach has done, he's actually just gone, right, we've tried that, but what we're not going to do is we're not going to go, right, well, we're going to shut up shop, or we're going to try and defend this, that, and the other. What he's done is he's just mixed the team round. Players are playing in different positions. It's about the experience. It's about what they can gain from this. It's about what they learn from that. And he's not concerning himself unduly with the outcome. And that's a great thing. It's very difficult, isn't it? I think for coaches, what part of this problem is that the result, again, talk about contingent self-worth. The result is a kind of a validation of our coaching, and we've all got personalities, we've all got ego, and to a certain extent, when you see results of games being linked to, kind of your ability as a coach, and the parents are looking at you and, oh, never mind, and really, should I have my son here? Should I take my son somewhere else, or my daughter somewhere else? Because, maybe they'd win somewhere else. And actually what they're losing, and I hope they can realise, is that this is a really positive environment for these kids. Yeah. And an outcome just is a very small part of the overall experience that they're going to have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we've spoken about this before, but I feel very sorry for the inexperienced coach, going out in this field, because you're very much going against the norm, the way everybody was brought up to coach, because organisations, for example, may demand results from us. Yeah. There's lots of coaches out there who, it's still children's sport, but you're still expected to be able to produce some results, so maybe parents come to your school. or your club. And it's very difficult to try and break that model of behaviour. And I think it's easier as you get older and you become more experienced and you realise that actually, that's not really that important. And I can find a way of articulating this and getting this message across. Very difficult if you're a junior coach. And I think when we do our coaches talk on building positive relationships with parents, in many aspects, unless we're talking in the pathway, when we're talking at grassroots level, you're actually wanting coaches to try and get parents to change their mindset of focusing on that process. Now, whether you do that via parents' meetings and playing games with them, whether you do it via touchline games, that's ultimately what you want, because that helps create that amazing sporting experience when we're maybe focusing on 10 different things that we can celebrate rather than one or two.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's something I wouldn't mind just sort of, digging into with you a little bit, actually, because obviously you work with parents a lot and you're doing your workshops. And I'm really intrigued by whether you have any ideas that you've used in the past with coaches and parents around how you get them to sort of be engaged. And the reason I say that is because I hear a lot from coaches, and obviously most people who listen to the show are mostly coaches. And one of the things I hear a lot from them, either via email or social or whatever, is how they're finding it really difficult to, great save by Evan there, he's done really well.
Great stuff.
There we go, yeah. How they're finding it really difficult to engage the parents. And I've had a lot of ideas over the time about things like parents' meetings and other like that. But if you've got any kind of top tips you've picked up over the years that, either you've heard coaches do or parents do, or you've used yourself or whatever, that would help coaches listening to the show, creating that connection and engagement?
Well, I think, first of all, the parents' meeting, I think, for me, is one of the best uses of time that you can ever have. I guess it's how exciting you can make that parents' meeting. And we also, because parents' meetings can be really sterile, can't they? You sit there, you get given your code of conduct that goes in the glove box and never appears again till the same time next year. You sit there and you have to listen to the logistics of it's not very exciting. But during that slot, you need to find ways of informing them and bringing them into the experience. So in your parents' meeting, can you give the parents a voice? Can you give them the opportunity to say what they would like their child to get from the sporting experience? So one of the things we do in the parents' meeting is we ask all parents to write, what would you like your child to gain from the sporting experience? And it's quite bizarre because you never really get, well, I want them to be an Olympian, or I want them to be a World Cup winner. You tend to get things that are more focused, well, I hope they have some friends, or they build good relationships, or they can work hard. Right. The problem we have then is parents say that that's what they want, and then their behaviours then don't reflect that with what they then go on to celebrate.
Got it, yeah.
And that's the difficulty. That's what you're actually trying to harness. So, I mean, a couple of things we do in parents' meetings. So we play domino rally. So we pull two parents up, Stuart, to play domino rally, box of dominoes, and they have to create a W for working with parents in sport. Yeah. And they get given a minute and a half to set up the dominoes, and on my go, they're allowed to knock them over. But during that minute and a half, we have 30 seconds of complete silence. We have 30 seconds of you shouting as though it's Liverpool v Everton. And we have 30 seconds of where people start applauding and saying, well done, and encouraging. And you can noticeably see the difference in body language between those three phases. And you can say to the parents in the room, well, did you see what happened when you clapped and said, well done? Do you see how they started smiling and the shoulders dropped? Did you see in the silence where it was slightly nervous and a bit unnatural? And yet, in the bit where we're all shouting, they start second guessing a bit. And, a couple of people doing the dominoes, when the shoutings become quite intense, end up knocking them over by mistake because of the fine motor skills. And it gives people a really visual look at the noise that we create on the touchline and how we can link it to that. Likewise, we play Play Your Cards Right. The big, massive playing cards. and we get parents to play higher or lower. I always joke, because I'm not as good looking as the sort of dolly girls that used to be on Bruce Forsyth's Play Your Cards Right, but we play higher, lower. And on one line, we go 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. And then on the other line, we go 4, 7, 6, 5. And then I go 8, 8 just to be really annoying. So they've actually got no chance of winning. And the parents have a load of fun laughing at playing higher or lower. But what we've done there is we've tried to show them how talent actually develops, and that we have to understand that it's not going to be this lovely upward line that just continues. The more we do, the better it'll be. That they understand that there are going to be times when they go backwards, and there are going to be times when they plateau out. And how are they going to manage those moments in the experience? I mean, there are a couple of ideas that we use in the parents' meeting itself. Out on the field, we encourage coaches to use bingo and maybe set some either team tasks or individual tasks with the parents, ringing them off if their child achieves those outcomes. We look at giving a whole team the bouncer clickers, and for every positive comment that they yell onto the field, they're allowed to click 1. As soon as they yell something instructional or negative, they have to reset it to 0. And the person with the biggest number of clicks wins a prize. Now, the best bit about that is if it's alcohol, the parents love it. And the next best bit is they actually self-police it, because they're all desperate to win. So you don't have to worry too much, because if somebody yells something negative or instructional, they turn to each other and say, reset that to 0.
Right.
And suddenly, and we're not saying that everybody should play clickers every Sunday. We're not saying that people should play bingo every Sunday. But if we can factor these in once every 3 months with different teams throughout a club to try and improve this understanding that it isn't solely about the score and what's going on in front of them at that point in time. It's just far more creative and fun.
Yeah, and that's a really great way of approaching it, I think, is to actually apply what we might be trying to do with the young person's experience in terms of providing them with as good as experience as we can, and gamifying, if you like. And actually, why shouldn't that apply to when the parents are learning? Because I think you're right. That was the sort of thing I guess I was angling towards. I think, these kind of super serious sort of parents meetings where, we're standing there in the front, and I think very often it can be very so it's the coach saying, well, these are my expectations and this is what you can get and this, that and the other. And I feel as if it's much more interactive and much more, like you say, informal and game-like, and we're actually conveying a very important message about saying, you've had a better experience as a group of parents through this approach, and this is something very similar that we want to apply with these young people here, and to give them the best possible experience as well. And I think that's a bit that, like you said before, is often the bit that's missing.
Yeah, just that. I guess that sort of fun connection, isn't it? And it's these relationships and the connections between, coaches and parents that make it work. And I was over with the Ulster hockey coaches last Sunday, and we were talking about how you build relationships with parents, and it's basic things like making sure you've had a conversation with a parent who's bringing their child to you for their sport. It's costing them money. They're having to give up time in their week. Sometimes parents' logistics, as trying to ferry everybody everywhere is a nightmare. Yeah. And actually, we can do a few things as coaches to help it. If we can be proactive in how we communicate in terms of making sure that our dates and our training sessions and our matches are in the diary quickly, the moment that we know there's a change, can we let the parent know immediately that there's a change to give them a chance of reorganising or sorting? And those little bits, putting on good training sessions, telling the parent that the child's done well or something positive about what their child's done, just helps build those relationships. And it's easy now in the day of text and WhatsApp and email to hide behind messages, and you can't see how people are conveying how they actually feel. And I feel that if we do all these things as coaches, and we try and do the right thing by the children, we try and do the right thing by the parents, and we bring them into the process, when we get that point where we are going to have to deliver some bad news at some point, it's going to happen. The parent isn't going to like it, but they'll maybe respect you in once it's all calmed down a few days later, the fact that A, you've made the effort to contact them, B, you genuinely have conveyed your emotions, and C, they may also go back and say, do you know what, it's bad news this week, but do you remember when he put his arm around little Johnny, and do you remember that week he told us how well he'd done this? He is actually on his side, Yeah.
And that's the important message to get to convey, like you say, the kind of, I know certainly in my experiences working at all levels of the pathway, I think the further up the pathway you get, worked in golf for a long period of time, and the further up the pathway you get, the more reliant a child becomes on their parent, because the parent's the one who's got to get them to the tournament, and work out all the logistics and the other kids in the family and everything else, so there's a whole load of things that they've got to consider, and yet the organisation that behind the kind of the providing this sort of training have never considered that, and almost just see the parent as a kind of necessary evil that they've got to deal with, and some of that comes from the fact that those parents are sometimes really quite frustrated at the experience that their child's had, and a lot of and so that creates this kind of us and them scenario. But the reason that they're frustrated is because they haven't got information. They haven't got the what they need to be able to understand why this is happening, where it's happening, how it's happening. And this is the big thing that I'm always talking to about coaches, is this idea of what I call selling the why. You can't just expect parents to understand that you're using a kind of games-based approach, and it's important to do so, because not only does it help kids with the experience that they're having, but it also helps them to develop skill more effectively. You can't just expect them to understand that. If they've always seen something else and they equate a different kind of experience as being linked to how it should look. So this idea of the parent as the necessary evil is something I think we've really got to overcome. We've got to see them that they're an active part of the participation experience, and they should be treated with as much respect as within reason, obviously, as long as they're being reasonable themselves. Yeah. But we should treat them with as much respect as we would expect to treat the children.
Yeah, and the us and them's got to go, Stuart. And I've seen certainly feel the last few years that although there's some really good work going on, that there's an awful lot of places where that sort of us and them's becoming more, what the gap's widening even more. And I think that's just because coaches haven't gone out of their way, as you say, to explain the processes or inform or bring parents into the process. And likewise, I think parents now have got very different expectations of their children that they had maybe a generation ago. So they can sometimes be difficult. They can sometimes be awkward in pushing what their agenda or what they see to be right. And I think coaches at the other side of that are like, oh, well, they're just mad. Well, they're not mad. They're just not maybe as well informed as you might be. And you need to try and do something about that, or something to try and help them with that. And without being aggressive and telling them, go and stand behind that line. You know nothing. I know more than you.
Yeah, 100%. And it's funny. I was doing a kind of a team building session. What a save that was by Evan. Full length, diving to his left, tipped it round the post. Tell you something. I've just been noticing. I'll come back to what we've been talking about, but just something I've noticed is, obviously, because this is his first time playing seriously, and he's in goal at the moment, and he's really struggling to kick goal kicks.
Okay.
And also to kick the ball from his hands as well. So of course they've had quite a lot of time where there's been quite a lot of time here where the ball's been stuck in the opposition's or in our half. So what he's now worked out, I don't know whether he's been told this or he's worked it out, but he's throwing it, and he can throw it further than he can kick it.
Fantastic. Brilliant.
Anyway, coming back to what we were just talking about, I spent some time with a really good colleague of mine, actually, who's long overdue in terms of coming on the show, a guy called Jamie Edwards, and he did some work with my team at work, just talking about, kind of team building, etc., etc. And one of the things he talked about, which I think is really important, is to frame things in terms of like me, us, them. But the starting point, if we want to improve our us and we want to improve our them, is the me.
Yeah.
And that was, for me, was a really kind of, I kind of know that stuff, but it was put it into a real focus of clarity, because it's like, right, what is it that I'm doing as a starting point that's helping me to create a better us, to create a better them? And instead of framing it the other way around, what's happening from them to me? What's happening from us to me? So it's good to think reframing things from the perspective of what is it that I'm putting out there that's bringing this back to me? I must be doing something that's bringing this back to me.
Yeah, and the parent one's always low on an agenda. I know we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago, and you know my feelings that the resource of parents as part of either CPD or Level 1 coaching awards, there should be a module on how do you build positive relationships with parents.
There should, 100%.
That is far more valuable than doing a 2-hour module on nutrition when you're coaching under 9s.
And it's not CPD. It should be a core part of the education qualification, shouldn't it? Because it's I always think that qualifications shouldn't be just about how do we train, or develop young people's skills and abilities, this, that, and the other. It should be about equipping coaches to deal with all the environmental challenges they're likely to come up against. And one of those is the parental component, because every single sports experience for children involves parents. So in my mind, I think if you're not engaging in that respect, then I actually think it's a little bit of from a coach education standpoint, you're not preparing the coaches for the experiences they're likely to have. And actually, thinking about it now, in all my career working in coach education, I can't think of a single sport that's got that, got that built into their initial coach training, is what you're going to need to be able to think and do about in terms of engaging with parents and stakeholders. I just can't think of a course that does that. But no, okay, it's limited experience, but I've never even heard of it.
No, and that's exactly what we're pushing. I mean, we've got our coaches book called Engage. We've got a resource. We've got a resource that goes through to the members area of our website, which again gives even more information about coaches. It talks about some of the games that we've talked about this morning. And we've got a presentation that we delivered, as I say, last weekend over in Belfast. And we think the combination of that kind of resource, something to read, an ongoing training, and somebody practically bringing these things to life are absolutely vital. And we're going to continue to push that.
Yeah, that's a really important point. And I think one of the other things I like about the approach that you're taking, to be honest, is you're allowing people to have the moments of revelation or the kind of moments of clarity themselves, as opposed to you're not just standing there and going, right, this is the way it really ought to be done, parents, or this is the way it really. You're actually saying, right, let's just create some experiences for you, and then just play back to me what that experience felt like. Play back to me what that experience felt like, and then the people are almost coming to their own conclusions about what the sports experience for young people should be like. I really like that approach.
Yeah, and hopefully that's hopefully that's the effective one. But all these things, and I'm sure you've seen this again with coaching, is a lot of it. You trial and error, and you work out what works well and what doesn't. And some things may work in other environments and may not work so well in others. But as long as we're prepared to, I guess, evolve, reflect. Hopefully in the end we'll have enough tools to make these experiences more positive, and ultimately it's the children who benefit, and that's what we're here for.
That's exactly the point I think I was thinking of when I was just talking about it. It's tools, isn't it? It's having the tools.
Yeah, and you know what? I think there's been a little bit too much science behind certain aspects of the coaching world, and maybe some of the content we try to drive onto parents. And actually, do you know what, Stuart? If somebody tells me again what parental engagement means, or what their definition is, or what parental education is, and what, I think I'm going to sort of walk out of the room, because that's not practically helping people. If we know what it is, regardless of what your definition may be, can we provide people with something that practically they can go out and use next week? And I mean, you must have been in presentations where you sit there and you're like, well, yeah, okay, I learned a little bit more about the theory and I know a little bit more about that, but I've now gone out into the workforce and I've got no more tools than I had 90 minutes ago. And we're really big on that. I challenge people when they leave, use something that you've learned today and put it into practice next week, because it's there and it's effective.
That's a really important point. Like you say, I mean, you can't expect people actually, if they haven't got the tools and even haven't got the understanding of how a tool could or might be used, you can't expect them to be able to navigate this stuff. It's just too complex. There's too many difficult things. There's emotion. There's that sort of the sense of kind of like I said before, there's an element of There's things like shame, there's things like love, there's things like jealousy, I suppose. All those factors are flying around in this world. And, everybody's trying to do their best. Nobody, I don't think, goes out there. Well, I mean, there are probably some, but very few, I think, people out there going out there to, with malevolent intent, trying to create horrible experiences for other people. They're just doing things because they're unaware or they haven't got the tools to be able to shape, and make sense of what's happening to them. I'll give you a really simple example. I was talking about this with a guy called Sam Jarman yesterday. Another guy who's going to come on the podcast.
I know Sam. Yeah, I've spoken to Sam a couple of times.
Yeah, it's great. We were just exploring this whole idea of, I was saying to him, one of the tools I've used working with Jamie Edwards is almost like using kind of different lenses or windows at looking at things. And one of my challenges was working with Jamie was he did a game or had an exercise where you had 3 balls. You've got your self ball, your relationship ball, and your work ball. And you have to try and work out which of these should be bigger or smaller. But the rule of the game is that they can't be the same size. So what I discovered about this, just being really honest with the world as I am, was that my self ball was quite big. My sort of my me time, if you like, and the things I like to do, like my coaching, everything else, is quite a big ball. And so that means that the relationships ball and work ball obviously necessarily have to be smaller. So the problem is that when the work ball gets bigger, I want to still maintain my self ball being bigger. And as a result, then the only sacrifice I make is the relationship ball. So anyway, having been on this course and done all this and used this tool, I came back with a different sense of, right, I need to make sure that my self ball isn't the biggest ball, because otherwise that's going to affect my relationships, affect my work life. I came home from this course that I was doing with Jamie, and my wife said, "You're like husband 2.0. What's happened to you?" But it's been really helpful to me ever since, because every time, like, for example, maybe I'm starting to just, I've lost focus on things, work's really busy, I'm still a bit focused and I'm being a little bit selfish, and my wife comes to me and says words to the effect, "Mate, you are taking the mickey now." Instead of reacting with an emotional response, I've got this lens to look through, and actually I use it, and I go, you know what? It's probably about right. And it's created far more harmony in our life and in our relationship. And so that's an example for me of a tool that's been really effective, but just helping me frame what's happening to me in any moment, in any time, in a different way. And
Brilliant.
Yeah.
I'm going to use that, Stuart, today, because I'm in a similar boat at the moment where I'm getting a number of looks and a number of comments around, my coaching world, working with parents in sport, making sure I see as much of my son and daughter as I can while playing sport. And I'm getting a few of those looks. And you're probably right. Maybe it is very selfish, and maybe I just do need to do a little bit of extra help rather than just worrying about what I need to do.
Yeah. Those of us out there trying to help others through the medium of social media and websites, etc., and trying to juggle that with family life and being a sports parent. I'm sitting here talking to you whilst my boy's playing in goal. I'm sort of doing it deliberately because it helps me keep out of the way and not trying to coach him, which is a good thing. I just wanted to have a good experience. Anyway, Gordon, now here's where technology is killing us, right? Because I've got a signal on my phone saying to me now, low battery, right? So we're probably going to have to bring our conversation to a close, and also the game's just about to finish, so I'm probably going to have to go anyway. Anyway, listen, I've loved the conversation, and I definitely want to drill into this in more detail with you in a kind of a part 2 in the future. But in the meantime, I know there's a lot of coaches out there, and there's a lot of people out there who've got kids in sport who probably could do with finding out a little bit more about what you guys are talking about. How do they track you down? Where can they find out more?
Yeah, so it'd be great to see people on our website, which is www.parentsinsport.co.uk. We're also on Facebook at WWPIS. We're also on Twitter at @_WWPIS. And as you said earlier, we've got lots of people starting to connect and share. And I think the more that we can bring these conversations out into the open and people engage with them, hopefully we'll all be able to work together to create some amazing experiences for the children.
That's fantastic, Gordon. I tell you what, I think for a long time I've thought to myself, we need something for parents. We need something for those people out there to help with this connectivity. I really admire what you're doing. I know how hard it is because I've been in your boat for the last 10, 15 years. And I know we're all doing it, trying to juggle family, day job, everything else. So I'm really appreciative for everything you're doing. I hope people are going to come and track you down and kind of get on board with you, because I think, what you're doing is sorely needed in the world of sport. And like I said, if you're prepared to, I know we've been talking about doing this conversation for quite some time, but if you're prepared to come back and share with me some of your experiences, I'd be really appreciative as well.
Yeah, thank you, Stuart. An absolute pleasure to be on your podcast, something that I've wanted to do for a while. So really appreciate the opportunity.
Brilliant stuff. And have a good day sporting parenting.
Absolutely, and you.
So I'm after the football match. I'm here with the young budding footballer, Evan. Evan, what was your first football game like?
Good, I liked it. Yeah, the first half wasn't so good, but the second half was okay.
What was better about the second half?
Well, I was in a better position, or I was in a more confident position of mine, which is goalie, and I made a couple of really good saves.
And so you like being in goal more, and so you felt like you could do better in goal because you felt like you had more skills in goal.
Well, yeah, I've had more practice in goal, more like at school and with Dad.
Okay, and so when you are when you were playing on the pitch, what did you feel like?
Well, I felt good for the first half, but I felt good for a bit. But when the goalie passed the ball to me and I completely missed the ball, just that made me go. I knew I couldn't do it.
And they went through and they scored a goal, didn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, but did you give up?
Well, no, but I didn't feel so good after that.
No, okay. But the thing about that was, what did you learn from it?
Well, to keep the ball close to your feet instead of disputing, or keep the ball close to your feet, really, and know where the ball is instead of just looking up, not looking at the ball.
So when this was your first ever go at football, wasn't it? And so, as in like a proper football match, like you played at school a little bit and stuff, but you don't play that much, do you? So, did you expect that you wouldn't make any mistakes at all?
No, I didn't expect to not make any mistakes because it was my first game of football, but still, I've been better than that at school.
All right. So you expected yourself to be a little bit better than that, did you? And you didn't, so you weren't that happy. Do you think it might have been something to do with the fact that, it was a big match and there was a lot going on and there was a lot of things happening? And do you think that was that might have been why that maybe that happened then? And actually, because if you're playing at school, it's kind of just sort of for fun, whereas this was obviously a little bit more serious, wasn't it? And there was lots more players and all those sorts of things. So do you think that might have made a difference?
Well, yeah, and the other team were much better than the other class in school, so...
So there was a little bit more pressure on, wasn't there, because they were coming to get you. Okay, and then when you went in the goal, what happened then? So was that you said you made some good saves, so what happened?
Well, I did make a couple of good saves. It was the defenders really gave me some awesome encouragement. And I let a few goals in, like one went under my legs. I let a few in, but I kept going, and I did have some better saves after that.
There was one that I saw that was really good. It was like you made like 2 saves in a row, didn't you? Where you ended up like making a save with the back of your leg, and then and then the ball went out, and then you had to run right across and slide to get rid of it because they were just about to score. That was a really good one. I saw that.
Yeah.
What was your best moment? Like, what was your best moment in the day?
Probably having my first good save, and all the defenders like cheering me on, saying, "Yeah, Evan, like good save." Like that made me really feel good about it.
Yeah, that was you had a good team for that, didn't you? Yeah. Now, your daddy, the podcaster, was doing a podcast, wasn't he, while you were playing? And when we came off, you weren't very happy with me, were you?
Not really, no.
Why not?
Just because you are a coach, and I just really wanted to have a bit more encouragement from you.
So you didn't want to see me walking around talking into my phone, did you? I didn't tell you I was going to do it either, did I? So you didn't know. You just thought I was chatting to someone on the phone and not paying you any attention. So it makes me a bad dad, doesn't it? But you know now, don't you, that I was watching all the way through, because actually in the podcast you can hear me. It's like actually talking to the person I'm talking to about the saves that you've just made or whatever, or some of the games that you've just played. So I was actually watching, but I know now that if I'm going to do a podcast in the future, that I'll make sure that you know I'm going to do it, so you don't think that I'm not watching. And also, maybe even what might be better is not to do a podcast when I'm watching you play sport and actually pay attention to you. Yeah? And then you'll know that I'm giving you a little bit more encouragement. I definitely don't want to be shouting at you when you're playing, though, because that might just confuse you. I'd rather you could just concentrate on the game. Yeah, so I definitely don't want to necessarily be shouting and screaming on the sideline and saying do this, do that, because that wouldn't necessarily be helpful, would it? We can do that afterwards when you've learned stuff. Yeah. Also, one of the things that I thought was really cool was, you know how you were struggling to kick the ball out of your hands?
Yeah.
Well, you worked out, didn't you, that you could actually throw it further than you could kick it. So you were doing throws and you were like starting some attacks off by throwing the ball to your teammates, and then they could get an attack. That was pretty cool. I like the way that you learnt that. How did you work that out?
Well, I just thought that if I threw it, because like I have experience in cricket and I know how to throw, I can throw it further than I can kick it.
So you
I'm not a very good kicker.
Okay, so we need a bit of practice on that, don't we? We do a bit of practice on your kicking out your hands and also your goal kicks, because that was quite hard as well, wasn't it? Trying to kick the ball. It's quite a big pitch, isn't it?
Yeah.
So having to kick it clear is quite hard. So we'll do a bit of practice on that before the next match that you play.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. And am I forgiven for being a podcasting dad not watching you properly?
Yeah.
All right. See you later.
Thanks for listening to the Talent Equation podcast. If you like the show, then please consider supporting it by leaving a review on your favorite podcast player, telling your friends about it, or even becoming a hero and show your appreciation by becoming a patron. Just head over to thetalentequation.co.uk and click on the Becoming a Patron button at the top of the page.
Thanks for coming on the show, Gordon. Really appreciate you taking the time out and joining me on my experiment of recording live from the side of a football pitch. As apt as it seemed, given the subject matter we were covering, I'm not 100% certain I'll do it again, certainly because of, not least of which, the fact that I felt quite bad afterwards when little Evan said to me that he wasn't all that happy because he didn't think that I was paying attention to him. I've since played the podcast back to him, so he does know that I was watching. In actual fact, I was probably sometimes paying more attention to the match than I was to the conversation with Gordon, so apologies to you as well, Gordon. Once again, trying to multitask, the life of the sports parent, blogger, podcaster, trying to do two things at once and probably not doing either of them particularly well. So anyway, I do hope you were able to get by listening to that. One of the couple of things there, though, for me that I think is really important to take away from the conversation with Gordon really is this whole thing about reframing relationships with parents. I think in too many cases it's seen as an adversarial relationship, and actually the more connections that we can build and the more strengths we can create in terms of strengthening the bonds between the players, the parents, ourselves as coaches, I think that only enhances the experience for young people. And I think it also makes, as a coach, certainly makes my life better having parents that are really engaged and very much part of the learning journey. And I very much try and involve them as much as possible in some of the decision making around the way we might approach selection, or we might approach how we approach certain games and what have you, and certainly getting them involved in the games as well on the sideline, as Evan's coach does, I think really pays dividends as well. Anyway, lots of rich learning in there. As always,
If you want to get involved and support the podcast, then please, by all means, leaving us a review is one of the great things, can help other people find us. Whacking it out there on social media, sharing it on social media, that's massively appreciated as well, so other people can get access. And then if you want to go that step further, then there's opportunities through the Patreon to support the podcast and help keep the lights on. In the meantime, I hope you have a great weekend of coaching, and remember, ditch those drills.